Well, then we got up to St. Ignace, and I had an uncle who lived up there, and we stayed with him for a while. Well, that was a good experience too, because I had some cousins up there, and one of them had a BB gun and all. So I asked him if I couldn't play with a BB gun. So he grudgingly let me use his BB gun. And keep in mind now, I was 5 years old at the time, maybe 4.5.
Oh dear, that's not
And it was a job for me to crank that BB gun. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I played with it for a while. Well, the next day he asked me, well, where's my BB gun? I said, what do you mean, BB gun? Oh, it's a BB gun. I don't know. So we go outside, and sure enough, I had left it in the grass overnight, and it had gotten rusty, and oh, how unhappy he was. Yeah, boy, he laid it on the meat pretty good. But anyhow, so then we go up to Ishpeming.
Why didn't he follow you? You're 5 years old.
Well, anyhow, we go up to Ishpeming, and as I say, my mother was so well received, all her buddies up there, nothing too good. Matter of fact, one of the guys owned like a confectionery store, and I would go in there, ice cream cones, anything you want, just whatever you want, that was mine. No, didn't cost a nickel. I had that. Well, so we're going to have dinner. Well, dinners, I know it's an early dinner, maybe luncheon, I don't know. But they have the dining room table, big dining room table, beautiful white damask tablecloths on it, all beautiful, everything all over the place, no plates. And, but I say, where is the men's room? Well, they say it's upstairs. So I tried upstairs, and boy, it sort of urges that I visit this men's room. I can't find the men's room. But right there in the middle of the floor, there's a grill. Well, someone's got to give. Yeah, it was right over the middle of the bed. Boy, talking about charging up the stairs.
Only 5 years old. What can you do?
But they didn't kill me. They did change the table, though.
The food wasn't on it yet.
Oh, yeah.
Was it?
And they did show me where the men's room was, too.
You gotta pay attention to these little ones.
Oh, wow, Grandpa. That was a good one. Resourceful. You look for what...
I should start writing some letters some days.
Yes, you should.
Your memoir wasn't outside. Was it inside? Really? Is that? I guess was it inside then? Not
The
outside?
house.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, let's see. What year was that? That was 5 years old.
So this is St. Ignace?
1922 up
Was this
north.
St. Ignace?
No, it's
St. Ignace.
Oh, this is...
Oh, or Ishpeming.
Yeah.
St. Ignace,
But
okay.
they still have houses nowadays. Some of those houses up there.
Some of them are still left.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So. But I guess she was in more of a fancy neighborhood, huh? Ishpeming, fancy neighborhood in Ishpeming.
I know, Marie and I went back a few years later, and we were married and that, and we were visiting around some of my mother's old friends. My mother asked us to stop and say hello to them, and that was a keen disappointment to me, because I would go into these old-fashioned houses. Now, they kept them good, don't misunderstand. They weren't falling apart or anything, but you walk in, everything was modern.
Oh.
And that's what disappointed me. They had new furniture, new rugs, new drapes. It wasn't old-fashioned. Like I was looking forward to it. I would go into this old-fashioned house and see its old stuff, those optic and viewers, and that kind of stuff. The only thing they had that might have been old-fashioned, they did have ferns. They had ferns.
You gotta go to watch this old house to get those old things, you know.
So, Grandpa, I know that you met Grandma when you were in college, but I don't ever remember hearing, like, how you were introduced to her or how you met
That's
her.
an interesting story. I got to tell you about that. I'm glad about that.
That's kind of heard.
You know, when I went to college, I was not a wolf or anything like that. That was one of the problems. I didn't have any money. And a guy wants to get along with girls, got to have a couple of bucks, right? Buy a hamburger now and that. Well, anyhow, UND was there. But by 1935, when I started going there were a few women. So I would say maybe 10% of the student body was women. And in every class, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 women at the most. Well, keeping in mind that I was 18 myself, I did observe women, but there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't ask somebody else for a hamburger. I didn't have enough money to buy a hamburger for myself. And what I found very interesting, for instance, right in front of me was a girl, and I've forgotten her father's name. He was a real popular politician. Buckley was his name, and he got himself shot, killed. But, so this was...
Because of his politics?
Pardon?
Because of his politics?
Yes. The gangsters got him. He was a public, I guess a radio announcer or something like that. And he was calling the shots on these guys, and so they called a shot on him too. And it worked. But remember, she sat in front of me, she had this big old fur coat. What kind of fur am I trying to say? Beaver, not big, real beautiful. You could tell us, and I just couldn't hardly resist just touching it. But, as I say, there were maybe 3 or 4 girls, and I was on, let's say, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I was out here, and over here's the windows, and right next to the windows there was a row, and Marie sat in one of those seats by the window. And I'm looking around, and she would always, when we were standing up, she always stood so nice and straight, pretty. And she told me later on that her grandfather, Mr. Buchanan, used to urge her, boy, when you stand up straight. And so on. And I couldn't help but observe what a lovely, good-looking girl that, whatever her name was, I don't know. And anyhow, it never dawned on me that ever get to know her well at all. She was 4 or 5 rows over, and she didn't have a fur coat or anything, but when she stood up, she did look real nice. She was nice and slender, nice figure, and that kind of stuff.
What class was, go ahead.
At that time, I was working in what they call the NYA, the National Youth Administration. I think that paid me $15 a month. And I got a job working for a guy by the A.T. Keene. He was head of the speech department, and I became one of his secretaries. Well, he had a little office, which was maybe about as big as this room right here. And Keene's desk was there, and he had another girl. He had a girl, her desk was over here, and my desk was over there. And we would do whatever had to be done. Mr. Keene wanted done. And I had taken typing in high school, so I could type, see, fortunately. Anyhow, it would get hot in there, boy, especially in June. April, May, June, getting warmer and warmer, and we would keep the door open sometimes. Well, right outside the door there were a row of lockers, and about the 3rd or 4th locker down was Marie's. So I was not the forward type at all. I didn't make a push, but it got to the point where she would say hi, and I would say hi back to her, and then one day she brought me some fudge.
Oh, Grandma!
Getting in the end.
What kind of fudge?
It was chocolate fudge.
And what
homemade fudge.
Oh, okay. And what?
So one thing led to another, and then that was the same year. Now I've gotten to know her a lot better, although I've never visited her at home or anything like that. When I mentioned this class where I had observed her, she looked so stunning. That was an English class, and both of us got along pretty good in this English class. We liked the professor, and he was a pretty good guy. But one spring day, it's such a beautiful day out, just lovely. And so we decided we're going to take a walk over to Palmer Park, and we cut our classes. Yeah, here it is about 10 o'clock in the morning, and we stroll over to Palmer Park. Well, you don't know anything about Palmer Park, but at one time that was just a beautiful place. It had lagoons and fishes and ducks and beautiful. And we would wander. So we spent all day long over there. And that's, I guess, where we really cemented our relationship. And on the way home, I know we're walking down Nichols Pass, but the instructor whose class we had dropped. And he said, it was a nice day, wasn't it?
Did you ever take her out for a hamburger?
In most cases, he had to pay. Matter of fact, I was working 3 or 4 times, jobs at a time, you know. I was working on the NYA. I was working for the National Guard. I used to meet once a week on Mondays for 2 hours, and they paid you every 90 days. So, I don't recall how much, but say I got $4 for an evening. Well, that's they pay it into 12 weeks. I got $45 for $48. Why, that's a bunch of money.
How much
did I go on tuition?
Right,
yeah. And how much did you give to your mom, too?
We had a deal, and my mother was pretty reasonable with this, but it's interesting. We did have a deal at our house. If you made money, you had to pay my mother or father, the family, 1/3.
Yeah.
I got 1/3 to spend and 1/3 to save.
Yeah.
That was the rule. Well, that didn't last too good. And my mother was pretty brave with that. She didn't always insist on the money.
But you did, I know you did.
So did you mainly get to know Grandma? You said, you know, you were kind of shy, didn't have money, and Grandma's the one that brought you fudge.
Yeah.
Was it just kind of talking in the hall and walking to classes? And
Oh, we get to, just like a mother and father, sure. But she was so nice, so nice.
12.5. You had to always look
Pretty.
2 hours.
Not bitter at all. I mean, not a nasty bone in her body.
No. Now, didn't she work there at school too, in an office or something? I
No.
mean, she had a job there. No? She didn't work there at all, huh?
I've never heard that story before. I never knew how you, I just knew that, Grandma had said something about her locker. I remember hearing that maybe you talked to her at her locker.
So that's another thing. How did I happen to get to school? I didn't have any money to go to school, and they want money up front. So UD would send solicitors around to the schools, and they're looking for customers. They want students. And so they came down to where I was in high school at St. Agnes, and they talked to the students and told us what a wonderful opportunity, and there were jobs available at UD that would help pay the tuition. Well, at that time I had a couple of jobs. One of them was delivering what they call shopping newses. Now the shopping newses were an advertising circular, and I had to deliver 300 of them at a whack, and that's a lot of it. And not only that, but you have to wrap them up and put a rubber band on and fasten them on the door of the door.
Whoa.
My God. But anyhow, it was a good exercise though, because I was in good shape from delivering all the newspapers. So I had that job. I was delivering the shopping newses, and I had joined the National Guard, so I was getting a quarterly, 45 or 50 bucks, I don't remember. And then scones whatever I could elsewhere. And so they say, Devine, go to UND, we can get you a job there. They got all kinds of jobs. Well, I go to UND, and I've forgotten the name of the priest who had addressed us at St. Agnes. We'll say Father Quinn, shall we say. So I go to UND to sign up, and they want to know where's the money. Well, Father Quinn has made arrangements for you to have a job here. Oh, is that right? Well, okay, that's okay. We'll just jot this down here, and we'll talk to Father Quinn later on. So, in the meantime, I don't know how this worked, but I'm pushing the broom down these halls and things, and here comes Father Quinn down the hall. Well, boy, I'm so happy. I fall on my knees. Oh, Father, thanks so much for getting me into school. And he looks at me, I can tell he doesn't know who the hell that guy is. He said, what did you say your name was? I said, Jim Devine from St. Agnes, remember? Oh, yeah. But anyhow, he did go back to the bursars, and he fixed it so they didn't throw me out. But now I got this broom. And
This is at UD you're pushing the broom.
Pardon?
You're getting the job at U of D with the broom?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was my first job, pushing the broom.
Okay.
Well, fortunately, Mr. A.T. Keene, the speech, and I could type, so they said, well, put Devine on the job, and that's how I got that job. And so I got that job, and that's how I paid the tuition.
That's how you met Grandma?
Well, part of the tuition.
Or how Grandma and you saw each other at the locker. Wow.
Well, if it paid only part of the tuition, then did you like owe tuition when you finished, or did you just?
Pardon?
Did you owe tuition when you finished, or?
No, I didn't, no.
You just kept
Well, I do
paying?
recall, okay, now, that's another good story. So,
How did you remember?
I worked there the first year, and this guy, A.T. Keene, was suggesting that maybe he'd give you a halfway decent job during the summertime.
Oh.
But he was sort of few and far between, hard to catch up with that guy. And he got himself a job in some other university, head of the speech department, and he hit the road. Didn't say anything about the job he had in mind. So, it's summer, and I don't have a job. I'm still delivering shopping newses. I'm still going to the National Guard. But I went from every factory and building in the whole city of Detroit. I covered 17,000 places all summer long, filling out these applications for positions, you know. Well, one of the places I stopped at was at Chrysler's. And I knew when I stopped there, it was a complete waste of time, just like every other place. But you do it. Well, I don't have much money, but I'm planning to go back to state school, except that I get a wire from Chrysler to come to work. Holy smokes, paying 75 cents an hour. So that's 35 bucks a month. I'm 35 bucks a week, you know, that's a big deal. Holy catfish. Well, I'm stuck. Am I going to go to school or am I going to go to work? So I decided, well, I'll go to night school. So that's when I transferred from day school down to night school. And so I worked pretty much days at Chrysler's for a while, and then I worked at, went to school at nights, and took me 6 years to get through school.
Yeah, still at U of D though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you only went to school with Grandma that first year?
Oh, yeah.
And the rest of the time you didn't
No.
go? I didn't know
But
that.
I saw her, you know, on the weekends and things
Yeah.
like that, sure. Mhm.
Yeah, okay. I imagined in my head, like 6 years, you
And
see
the job
something
at
wrong.
Chrysler was
Yeah.
a dream job.
And you might
right?
want to know, well, what did we do for entertainment? I was a big spender. We used to go down to the theater, and there were several, you know, halfway decent theaters around, 35 cents, and go in there to see a double feature. And I know Marie commented several times, they had a lot of comedies in between the films. You know, it was a double feature. They had two pictures and a lot of comedies in between. And oh, I used to sit there and laugh. Oh, she thought that was so much fun. I laughed my head off. But now I never laugh anymore for some reason.
Oh, Grandpa.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
But we saw a lot of movies, I'll say that. All the good little theaters around town. 35 cents. And then we would maybe stop and get a hamburger. And talk about hamburgers. They used to have better hamburgers than they do today. And better hot dogs too. And there was one hamburger, I haven't seen it in years and years. It was, I think it was Ideal was that outfit that did it. And it was made of ground round, you know, but it was done in a long...
Square?
Well, it was long, but it was just about 3/4 inch wide and about 1 inch deep. And you put that in a hot dog roll.
Oh.
With some nice juicy in there.
Here's an idea that might
So good,
go,
huh?
guys. Yeah.
Ideal
Bring this
hamburgers. So I'd like to run into those someday. Oh.
Hamburger dog.
They turn it into a bra.
Yeah, there you go. So I go into, the first time I go into this place, see, and I'm gonna buy these hamburgers. So the waiter comes up and says, 2 hamburgers, please. Bree says, I'll have 2 also. I wasn't sure if I had 40 cents. But no, he said, no, I had. Because 1 hamburger was really all you needed.
Ooh.
Did you get 4 hamburgers then?
No.
Oh, no,
Oh.
okay. Was she joking?
Pardon?
Was she joking?
No, she was serious. Well, she had never been to a place like that. She didn't know what she was gonna get. All of them, and my father-in-law and mother-in-law,
Yeah.
sisters-in-laws,
Yeah.
didn't have any brother-in-laws, but.
Tell them how
I did
you thought,
through marriage.
tell them how you thought mom's family was just, wealthy.
How I got what?
Tell 'em, you know, you used to think Benno's job was like the ultimate job you ever wanted to have.
sure, right,
He
yeah.
had, yeah.
He did have a pretty good job. From my point of view, he was not a millionaire, but boy, he worked, never missed a, well, I'm going to never miss a day, but he did, because during the real depths of the Depression, even the most respected guys were only working like 3 and 4 days a week. And that was true of Ben. Ben was Marie's father, you know. Oh yeah, and that's a good point. It was through Ben that I got the job at Ford's. So here I am, I'm working at Chrysler's.
Where
And,
at Chrysler's?
You know, I got the first job at Chrysler's, and I would get laid off, and 2 or 3 days later, I'd get a wire to go back someplace else, and do some other jobs.
What were you doing for Chrysler? Like working on the
A whole
assembly
bunch
line?
of different jobs. I
Okay.
can tell you 10 different jobs I did
Okay.
at Chrysler's.
All right, all different sorts of things. But
But
Ben,
the first job was taking inventory. They were, they had a parts depot down in mid-Detroit there, and they wanted to inventory it. So they hired me for about 10 days to help take inventory, which I did. Then they decided, well, they're gonna move this facility up to Marysville. Why don't you hang around and you can help us, we'll move this stuff. So I hung around another month, loading boxcars and getting stuff all shipped up there. But whenever a job would end, then you'd go home. And I did find out the hard way that just be patient, you'd get another wire eventually. So, I could tell you a lot of jobs I had at Chrysler's, they were rough. But what really irked me at Chrysler's, the unions were coming in a little stronger then. And I had a job over at Dodge, Maine, working on the end of a furnace. Well, what happens when they make castings, like for engines and things, they have to have sand cores, and these sand cores have to be dried, and they run them through these ovens. And here it is in the middle of July, it's 110 outside, and then you got the furnace going inside, that's 210. Well, boy, those furnace, and that was my job, at the end of the furnace, to take those things out of the furnace and put them on a conveyor. Hot. But it was paying 75 cents an hour, and I needed that money. But the unions were coming in. And while they didn't have a union at the time, these guys were selling these little tickets they put on their caps that he paid his union dues. Well, what would happen is about 4 or 5 of these union leaders would say, it's too hot, we're going home. Well, you can't do that. If 4 or 5 guys go from the assembly line, you gotta shut that assembly line down.
Yeah.
You know, whether you wanna work or not, they gotta have everybody there. They can't go with half a staff. So 4 or 5 or half a dozen guys would go. I was done. I'd have to go home. And that sort of irked me. I didn't like that. I needed that money.
Money, yeah.
So I'm talking to Ben, Marie's father, and he points out that they need staff every quarter up in the payroll department, because they have just come up with withholding taxes. Prior to this, they didn't have withholding taxes on your wages, see? And they would deduct the withholding quarterly. I don't want to know. Anyhow, we had to prepare a quarterly report, and they needed more staff in the payroll department at that particular time of the year. So 4 times a year, they needed added staff. So Ben got me some Ford Motor Company letterheads and some Ford Motor Company envelopes, and I had a nice letter typed up to who was the guy in charge of, what's his name? Miller, R.J. Miller, I think his name was, who was in charge of the employment at the entire Ford Motor Company. And that's why I wrote a nice letter to R.J. Miller and introduced me and explained that it was my father writing this letter requesting that me, his son, get a job working in the plant there. And then I went on to say that my father was a tool and die maker, as he was a tool and die maker. So I signed my dad, got in that big long line, and we go along, and the guy, not really, but I hand him the envelope. Oh yeah, okay, well you go in there. Well, and that was bad. I was dressed pretty nice. I had a beautiful, brand new, lovely white, heavy sweater. And they said, sit down, I'll see about a job. So about 20 minutes later, yeah, we got a job for you. Okay. And they take me down to the truck reaction housings. And that's my job. I work on the truck reaction housing line.
In your white sweater?
In my white sweater. And this, truck reaction housing, there's a big bell there, and there's a big tube sticking out the back, and I'm putting little rivets in there, and then the guy put that in the machine and they fasten those rivets. But boy, there's a lot of oil and stuff floating around. You should have seen me at the end of that day. That sure shot. But that led then, so sure enough, as soon as they needed some staff up in the payroll department, they had me available, so they took me up there. Worked there for about 3 or 4 weeks and had to go back out in the shop, and always back on truck reaction housings. But then got a break and got a chance to go to work in the accounts payable department. That was my first real job in the accounting department as such. And I worked there up until 1957. When I quit there, I went to Chrysler.
So when did you decide to study accounting?
Pardon?
Were you always going to study accounting in school? You said you went to night school, so...
Oh, yeah, I was majoring in accounting.
Oh, you
yes.
were, okay, right from the beginning.
So you knew that before you got the accounting job?
Well, you only have a choice. What are you going to... Law, I didn't think I was going to... Because that was going to take too long. I didn't have time to go through law school, that kind of stuff. I couldn't see medicine and engineering. I would have gone into engineering, but I just didn't see how I could cut it. Although that would have been ideal, because they had a system at that time where... I forgot what they call it. You'd work in a plant for, say, 2 months, and then you'd go to school for 2 months. So you went back and forth like that. So a lot of the guys did that and became pretty good engineers.
Yeah. They still have that as part of engineering programs today. Not quite some are not all that back and forth. It can be a semester on, semester off, but that's how they train.
We had that in accounting. We get people from U of M that way when I was in public accounting.
Okay, I don't know if I can hear you over there.
Yeah, so we'd go to Ann Arbor or wherever and we'd interview people. I do that.
Boy, that's another thing, a big mistake.
Great.
So I was drafted, and when I was drafted, I was making $195 a month, which was big money before the war. Here I am, a young college kid, and most, like guys out in the plant, they weren't making maybe $100 a month at the most, so my $195 was pretty good dough. But then when I came back after the service, I had rights to go back to work at Ford. So the guy that interviewed me said, well, you haven't done anything in the Army that really has fitted you for a better job. He says, I will put you back in the same old job, and we'll give you, say, $200, whatever it was, I don't know. And I thought, gee, it's not very much. But I took it. And after I got back in the job, that was another thing. I was so welcomed back, because what happened is during the war, all the guys were drafted, and they had filled the staff up with women. Now, I'm not going to belittle the women, but they didn't grab a hold of the job. Like, I had been on this job for a couple of years in accounts payable, and I knew the work is back and forth. And so when I came back, oh, they were so happy, because they put me to work with 20 women working for me. And they were all making more money than I was. And so I went to see my boss, Mr. Davis, a nice guy. Well, I said, okay, I'll give you a raise, $250. Well, hell, The other guys had a job Silver Line, they were making $450 a month, and here I'm making $250.
How did you know what they were making?
You talk to one another.
Whoa, I thought that was illegal.
No, that's not illegal.
No?
No way.
Well, you don't blab it around, but when you get to know a guy pretty carefully, they chit-chat back and forth. We rose to a halfway decent job there at Ford's. Got some pretty nice jobs out of it, and then some that didn't work out so good. Anyhow, one of the fellows used to work for me. I was the resident controller out in the stamping plant at one time, and this fellow worked for me. His name is Joe Thomas. Real nice guy, smart. And he left Ford's and went over to Chrysler's. And he got in pretty solid over there. He was now assistant divisional controller for the Chrysler division. For the the Plymouth division. They had two divisions. They had the Chrysler and the Plymouth. So he was assistant divisional controller. And he used to call me all the time, Devine, come on over, I'm going to give you a good job. And I, nah, Devine, forget it, I like it here, I'm not going to. Oh, but one day he got me in a weak mood. And he says, well, I'll tell you, we'll pay you, I can't pay you $10,000, but I can pay you $9,900 to join, see? And he says, I'm going to make you the controller of the Plymouth assembly plant, which was the largest assembly plant in the world. And I thought, gee, that doesn't sound too bad. And if I started at just under 10,000, it'll only be a few months before they'll give me a raise for sure. So I signed up and I went over there, and everything went swimmingly for the first week or so. And then what happened?
Somebody else that got it.
They combined the two divisions. They had the Chrysler division and the Plymouth division. Now they're trying to economize, and they, collapsed them. And a lot of guys are looking for jobs, including the guy that hired me. So he got the job that he had promised me.
Oh.
Well, it didn't hurt me money-wise, because they still paid me the same amount of money they agreed, but I didn't have that forthcoming big raise I was looking forward to. So the $10,000 wasn't too bad at the time. It was a raise from when I left Ford's, so I couldn't complain too much.
And you still had a job?
Oh yeah, I still had the job.
Oh.
But I wasn't the controller of the plant now. I was just the assistant controller.
Oh.
Well, I hate to tell you, this is really sad, because he was a nice guy and I did like him. But he got involved with one of the key punch operators.
Oh.
And when they found out about it, he found it, well, they wanted to move him to another plant, which they did. They moved him to the truck plant then, get him away from his romantic relationships at the Plymouth plant. But he was pretty much put out, embarrassed and everything. So he quickly got another job on the outside. Well, that leaves me pretty much dangling. The guy who's supporting me, is no longer with us even. But it worked out.
Yep, you stayed there for a long time.
So what was it that Benno did?
Oh.
He gave him the letterhead to
Yeah,
write.
but what was Benno's job?
But
What was Benno's job that you liked so much?
Ben worked up in the accounts payable department at the Ford Motor Company, and he was an auditor up there.
Okay.
He had one of the more responsible jobs in the accounts payable department at that time.
Understanding helped Henry Ford on with his gold, right?
Well,
When
Ben
they were
was
at Highland Park, he had the desk right outside Henry Ford's office, and in the winter time, when Henry Ford was going out or coming in, he would help him with his overcoat.
Yeah, you got all 12 of those furs on it.
I hear some people didn't like Henry Ford.
A lot of people didn't like him.
That's right.
all the Jews didn't like him, I know that.
Matter of fact, the only occasion in legal history where they have been forced to declare a dividend was when
Yeah.
the co-owners of the Ford Motor Company sued Henry Ford. And I think the court made him pay them $29 million in dividends or something like that. But he then made it miserable enough, so he bought out everybody other than himself and his family.
Yeah, it was like I watched a PBS documentary about it, about him and his company, and his relationship with his son was not very good, and how it was he never wanted it to be.
Jesse, as his wife, is saying to him, the ceiling is black, it's got to be cleaned. I want Ben wash the ceilings down. And he said, yes, yes. Well, he wouldn't do it. So one day, Jessie, his wife, and I guess one of her children left, and Ben said, come on, we're going to wash the ceiling. So we got a whole bunch of newspapers out and spread around the paper, got the ladder out, got the bucket out, filled the bucket full of sudsy water and sponges and all, sprinkled some water on the papers around, and sat down and read the paper. Until he comes home, oh, it was beautiful. That was him, I didn't do that. But he smoked cigars, see, and she didn't want him smoking cigars in the house, so they had a nice fireplace. He'd go over close to that fireplace and puff along there by the fireplace.
Isn't that still in the house?
Webster Fancy Tales was what he used to smoke. They used to have a couple of cigar manufacturing places in Detroit. They don't have them anymore. And one of them was the Webster outfit, and they made some real nice cigars at one time, but I guess the labor unions were too much for the cigar people, so they moved out. Well, let's see.
Time for bed.
Enough chit chat, do you think?
10:30.
You guys learned a lot tonight, didn't you?
How to play euchre.
Oh, you learned? Is that you?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
I don't know how to play euchre.
Entirely.
Mom could teach.
Forget about pinochle when you play euchre, and
I don't know how to play piano.
That'll be easy for you then.
There's only a few rules.
So I'm going to hit the sack.
Me too.
Nice chit-chat. Nasty, taking pot shots. So this guy had 1 gallon cans of oil for sale. See, there was a gas station in the back of our house. Our house did not go through from Hanover to 14th Street. At one time, they used to own that. There were 2 lots there, the front and the back lot. Well, the people we bought the house from had already sold that back lot, and there were 2 buildings back there, a garage and a shop where a guy had a shoe repair shop.
Right.
So then they built we found out, we knew we didn't own that. We didn't own that property. The garage was not ours. Where the shoe shop was, that was not ours. That had been bought, and I didn't know that until later on, by the Standard Oil. So Standard Oil came in there and tore all that junk out and put in a gas station. So the back of our lot, well, there were about 4 lots in a row that comprised this gas station, Standard Oil. And I know in the wintertime, for instance, I could go out there and get a job shoveling off those driveways, because they didn't have the equipment back in those days for handling snow like they have today.
Yeah.
When you want to move snow, you got to get yourself a snow shovel. And I can remember shoveling snow, holy Moses. But so one day, I'm up in my bedroom there with my BB gun, and this guy has stacked up, maybe 25 or 30 1-gallon cans of oil, a pyramid of these oil cans. That was irresistible with me and my BB gun. Well, I found out later on, shooting from upstairs in my attic at those cans, that put a hole in the can.
Yeah, it would.
The next guy I know, this guy banging on the door. He wants me to pay for all that oil.
Yeah.
Well, I was about, I suppose, 13, 14 years old at the time.
You're shoveling a lot of snow for a while.
So boy, I had a tough time coming up with that money, but he was good enough so that he would open those cans and put them in. You could buy quart by the oil that came in a glass jar, and they would pour it into your motor, you know.
Right.
So he had a lot of these jars left over, and he was able to fill up about 20 of them, saving me a lot of money there. Otherwise, I had to pay for all that oil.
You shot holes in all of the cans?
No, not all of them, just I have a dozen of them. Yeah, I never realized that a BB gun would put a hole in the oil can.
It is a gun.
And from that distance, you know, it's 100 feet or more.
The speed of the BB doesn't slow down.
Pardon?
The speed of the BB doesn't slow down.
Well, how do you know it was you shooting his cans?
I don't know what.
How do you know it was you? It could have been anyone.
I think there's only got a neighbor with a BB gun. And you know, that's another good thing. When I was in the Army, I was classified as an expert. Matter of fact, I shot the highest round when I was up in the Aleutians than anybody else in my battery. I was a champion shot.
Oh, really?
And I got that. That was what's called a BAR man, Browning Automatic Rifle. That Browning Automatic Rifle weighs about 25 pounds. That baby is a big gun. It's a .03 as far as that's concerned, the caliber. But the gun is a big gun. And you have these bandoliers where you have to carry your ammunition.
Right.
Well, there must have been 20 pounds of ammunition.
Is it like a machine gun or is it like a single shot?
Well, it's an automatic rifle, that's what it is.
So you hold the trigger down and it just shoots.
And that's just it. We could spray a lot of leather on, but you can't hit the broadside of a barn with it.
Right.
Because it has a big bolt, and that bolt comes back, and when it hits, it jars the gun.
Right.
It also fires at the same time. So, anyhow, when we went down, keep in mind now, I was in the Army for 6 years. I only shot for trial once, and all that time, and that was up in the Aleutians. And I'd been in the island, up in the islands for a couple of years at that time. And he decided we all had to try to qualify with the rifles. Well, when it came my time to shoot, I had to get and borrow a gun from somebody else. I had to borrow an M1. Mm-hmm. I couldn't fire my BAR.
Because the M1 is like a single shot, right?
Yeah, well,
or is it auto too?
It carried 6 rounds, but you could pull them off one at a time, you know.
Right.
Or with the BAR, you pull that trigger, it goes brrr.
Right.
Anyhow, so I borrowed this gun from a guy, and they gave me 3 shots to zero the gun in. And I did that, adjusted the thing, and then we fired for record, and I was the highest guy in the battery. So, anyhow, was that the point I was trying to make? Oh yeah, I had first time I ever fired the gun. Oh, and why was I so good with that with the M1? Because I mentioned about these test tubes and things, and we just go down the basement and would hang them on a clothesline down the basement,
right,
and swing them back and forth. And I just got a rider, pow, boy, I could pick those swing.
Wow.
I got pretty good with that BB gun in the basement, see? So here I'm at the Aleutians, and they kind of, how come you're so good, Devine? And I explained to them. Well, I said, I did just like they said in the manual. Well, that so impressed my captain. He had me address people. Now, how come you were such a good shot? And I said, because I just followed, I said, just like I said in the manual. Oh, he was so happy to hear that. Didn't bother to mention my experiences down the basement with a BB gun, you know.
So you had never shot an M1 before?
Never had shot the one, and I got 3 practice rounds with that M1 before I fired it for record. And that's the only time I ever fired that gun for record.
So they didn't let you practice with like your BAR gun or anything? Like you didn't ever have like...
I never fired the BAR for record, no. Although I did fire it. Once I was able to steal some ammunition. That's .03 caliber ammunition.
Right.
And I had about 2 bandoliers.
Right.
Which carried, I think it was 12 shots in a bandolier. I'm not sure about that, 12 or 16, something like that. So I took my BAR and I went down on the beach, and I wanted to get quite a ways from my organization. See, I was in this artillery unit, and we had a location, covered so much area, but I didn't want them to know I was out firing illegally, because I had no authority to go out and fire this gun, but I was anxious to try it. So I walked 5 miles down the beach, and I found a couple of old pieces of orange crates down there, which I set up on the bank, and I stepped back maybe a couple hundred yards to see if I'd hit. I never did hit that orange crate. That was spraying lead all over the place, my gosh.
So they issued you that gun, that BAR gun, but you were never allowed to practice with it.
I never fired it for a record, no.
What do you mean by for a record? Like.
We'll take it out to try it out and see how good you are with your BAR or your M1 or whatever you're firing. They have the caliber. What was it? They had 22 caliber. You had two, but we weren't issued 22 calibers. That came out later in the war.
Right.
When we were fighting the Japanese war down in the South Pacific, they were using a lot of 22s down there.
But most of the soldiers had the M1.
Most of them.
Right.
That was the issue, the regular issue.
But you did not have an M1.
I didn't.
They gave you a bar.
They gave me a bar.
But you were never allowed to fire it.
Never fired it for record.
How does that make sense? How are you supposed to, what if the Japanese come? You gotta shoot them, you know what I mean?
Well, if I didn't know, it didn't make a damn bit of difference, because the only thing that they could do was spread a lot of lead around. You couldn't hit the broadside of an environment.
Was it were you really low on ammo or something? They were trying to conserve ammunition?
I really can't tell you how we were fixed for ammo. We were never issued ammo. You had the guns, but you didn't have the ammo. Except where you could steal some, such as I did.
So your main job, though, was just manning the artillery stuff? So the guns don't really matter.
What they called a 155 millimeter.
Yeah.
155 millimeter howitzers. Howitzers. Well, hang on a minute. When I was first drafted, I was drafted in the 182nd Field Artillery, which was a howitzer outfit. Now, a howitzer is different from a rifle. The rifle was long barrel guns, see? So after we get up to the Aleutians, they grabbed our howitzers that we went up there with and replaced them with these long toms.
Okay.
So those, I'm not sure how long that rifle barrel would be, about maybe 10 feet, 12 feet long. It's a long gun. Can fire a long ways. That gun would shoot over 20 miles.
So did you practice with those?
Never fired a round on it.
What is it?
Never fired a round.
What were you guys doing up there? I don't understand.
But they had a little gun you mounted on the top of the big guns, on top of the 155.
Yeah.
And it was a 35 millimeter gun.
Yeah.
So for practice, we would fire 35 millimeter rounds. Now, the 35 millimeter round is only about that big a round, you know.
Right.
But didn't fire very many of those either.
So, there wasn't much. Was there a lot of practice of anything? You just mostly sat around?
Oh, we had a lot of dry runs, you know, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. We had what they call a plotting table, which was laid out typically of the area where we were, represented various spots.
Right.
And we would take, and on the plotting table, practice to see how we would do. And that was good practice, you know, right, left, north, south, east, west. But,
was there math involved with calculating?
Not really.
At all,
no. Matter of fact, the way it would work, the guy on the howitzer was given a elevation and a deflection.
Right.
And they would fire a round, and then they would mark that where the round landed.
Okay.
And have to compensate. If they had planted here a little, planted over here, they had to make an adjustment, see? So they had this big plotting table, and they would plot. The ship is moving, and on the table you're following them.
Okay.
But you've got to lead them, because it's going to take that shell maybe 40 seconds to get out there.
40 cents. Wow.
In the meantime, the ship has been moving, so
Right.
you don't want to shoot where he is, you've got to shoot where he's going to be.
So the plotting table was just a big map,
Yeah.
and then it had on it like, okay, to shoot it here, this is the elevation and deflection. And then you'd be like, okay, well, we know the ship is here, and in 40 seconds it's going to be here, so we shoot it here.
And, you know, as the ship is moving, they're plotting it. So they say, well, he moved that far in the last 20 seconds. He's going to move that far in the next 20 seconds. So you don't shoot here, you shoot over here.
Right.
Hoping he's going to drive into your shell.
I see. So you drilled for that, basically. How many years were you up in the Aleutians for?
Pardon?
How many years were you there for?
Oh, I was up there for 4 years. Let's see, I was up there for 5 years. Aleutians and Alaska.
Yeah.
I got up there in May of 42
Right.
and came home in 46.
Right. Were you ever given leave to like go back, or
I
you?
did. I got 2 leaves, as a matter of fact. My sister Julian was in a real bad automobile accident.
Okay.
And it would appear she was going to die. So they did an emergency. I forget what kind of leave they call it. But they sent me home. And she, well, I'm glad to say, survived, although she got pretty badly beat up. Which I should tell all you people, because so many people make the same mistakes she made.
Uh-huh.
She had just graduated from high school, my sister Julian, and she had a good friend in Affolter who lived down on Grosse Ile, if you know where Grosse Ile is, not far from where we lived.
Okay.
Anyhow, when they graduated from high school, June Affolter was given as a graduation present a brand new Chrysler convertible. Well, now that was an expensive operation during the war, but those cars are few and far to come. Anyhow, Julian, my sister, is now driving this brand new Chrysler convertible down the highway.
How did your dad afford something like that? If he was just a...
Well, her father, her mother, the Affolters were well-to-do. They owned a dairy down there, I believe it was.
Okay.
Anyhow, Julian, however, happened to be driving the car.
Oh, so Julian, okay, so her friend got the car.
Yeah, her name is June Affolter.
Okay.
And my sister Julian is driving June Affolter's car.
Got it.
And she rolled off the road.
Oh.
Well, it was a paved road, and she pulled off, and she, not having had the experience, tried to wheel it back up on the road, see? Well, the front wheels buckled on her, and the car rolled down the road. And they both got pretty well beat up, but Julian was real bad. Affolter was hurt, but not quite as bad as Julian. And she spent several months in the hospital recovering.
Okay.
But
So you got leave for that. And then what was your other leave for? Was it another emergency?
so then I had been up there for about 4 years and decided I was entitled to, well, I had been entitled to a leave after a couple, 3 years as it was. So now if I get back there, I'm fairly back to, well, you've got leave time, so you want to go back home? Sure, I want to go back home. So I went over to Jasper National Park there and had a lot of fun in Canada. And there was a thing, they had a train going from Jasper over to, maybe it was someplace in Canada. Anyhow, it was a long train ride, 600 miles on the train.
Uh-huh.
And that train, so slow, you could stand on the back platform and count the crossbars as you crossed. Boy, it was going about 10 miles an hour down that. It took us about 3 days to go 600 miles.
Wow.
In the meantime, I was playing bridge all that time, so I had fun on the train. And then I got home,
Okay.
was able to bum a ride on an Army plane going down to Chicago, down to Minneapolis. Yeah, in Minneapolis. So I got off there and I was able to bum a ride on the 500, which was the name of a locomotive that went from Minneapolis down to Chicago. And I got on that Minneapolis on that 500 miles in 500 minutes. That was what I got the name. And, boy, there was some guy out there, he kept insisting on buying all those GI's drinks. He just couldn't buy enough drinks for everybody. Boy, by the time I got to Minneapolis, Chicago. Anyhow.
It could have been Minneapolis, probably.
Yeah. A lot of fun that war.
So how long was the leave for? Was it like a few weeks or a month?
Oh, it was for a month.
Oh, that's good.
And I'm buried down in Chicago on my leave, and the war ended. So they're going to keep me in Chicago, which they do, fortunately, I see. But that was another case. You're supposed to put your name on the list, for this discharge list. Well, boy, I put my name on the list right away. About 3 days later, my name hasn't come up. I go back. Hey, okay, well, sign the list again. I must have signed that list about 4 times. Took about 2 weeks and realized I was aboard and finally let me go.
Well, they're still paying you, so.
Well, Marie came on down, and she was there for a while, and then she had to go back home. So we got in a bridge tournament, Marie and I. Now, keep in mind, I don't think Marie had ever played bridge before in her life. And I had been playing up in the Aleutians there for a couple of years by that time, so I thought of myself as an expert. Well, we won the defensive score, Marie and I. I think that won us 2 telephone calls back home.
You couldn't just make phone calls back then? You had to like...
If you want to make a phone call, it was at your expense, yeah.
It was expensive to do it?
No, it was only, I think it was 5 cents, something like that on a telephone. A telephone call was more. I don't
Was
know.
it by the minute, or was it just like per call?
It was it by the minute or by the call? I'm pretty sure it was by the call.
Okay.
Although I don't really recall.
So you pay 5 cents.
You had a machine, you had to keep pumping money into the machine, and I don't recall. I'm pretty sure that call back home probably was at company expense. I don't remember.
So you won 10 cents at bridge.
Maybe so.
That's exciting. So how was it like? What was the pay like in the military? Was it really bad?
What was what?
Did they pay you at all when you were in the military for those 4 years?
Oh yeah, they paid you $30 a month.
That's pretty good.
$1 a day.
I mean, for sitting around.
And then if you got to be a corporal, I don't recall, it was maybe $1.25.
Did it matter if you were like in combat or not, or
No.
I mean, everyone got paid the same?
There was not combat pay, you know.
Okay. But I mean, you also didn't have to like spend any money when you're up there, so you must have had.
Well, they had a
Quite a bit
PX
safe.
where you could go in and buy ice cream cones. You know, after a while, one of the first things started out, everything was pretty minimal. You like to have your equipment with you.
Right.
So we didn't have a PX or anything like that where you could go in and buy ice cream cones or candy bars. That was for about a year before they got some PXs set up. And they built a chapel, you know, and they built a theater, and they built several hangars
Right.
for the airplanes. Because where they sent me up to the Aleutians, Umnak, it originally was intended to be an airport base. It was intended to be an artillery unit and all. But once you put the airport in, then you got to put protection around it.
Right.
So that's why you have
So they had
artillery.
to- So it was an airport, though, right? There was a lot of planes going out of
Well,
it?
as I say, they didn't begin to build that facility until the first of the year. That was 1941. They must have begun right around the beginning of 40, sometime before 1940, because the time I got up there at Umnak, they had this small airport in, but they didn't have any facilities for the troops who were going to protect the airport.
Right.
So the airport itself had been started, but it was just a P-40 strip.
Okay.
So they had to enlarge that because ultimately they're running PBYs out of there. They're running their B-24s and B-17s. So that was a pretty big airport when they got finished with it.
Right.
And I can remember in the morning, they would take off about 3 o'clock in the morning, these dug up B-24s, B-17s. And boy, they had been going for a mile before they go to the top of our tents. We were in tents at that time.
Yeah.
And I got news for you. A 24 B-24 goes overhead with those 4 engines going in one whack. That'll wake you up every time.
So it was, and where were they bombing in?
Down at Kiska and at 2.
Okay.
So that's down the far end of the chain.
Okay.
We were a little, not, we weren't quite halfway down.
So that was in 41. They were doing the bombers from your island.
Yes.
And
Well,
they were.
the bombing probably didn't start until, well, probably, let's see, 41, probably 42 before the bombing began. Because it was after Dutch Harbor that we began to bomb down there, right?
Right.
There wasn't nothing to bomb. We didn't know there were any Japs down there until they raided Dutch Harbor, and that alerted us to the fact there were Japs around.
But you were already building the airport before you knew that the Japanese were.
Yeah.
You just thought they would come.
As a matter of fact, the first Jap I saw was about the second or third day. I think it was the second day on the island. And they wanted us to dig foxholes. So we go up to this a little mound, and 3 or 4 of us up there digging foxholes. And we hear this rat-tat-tat-tat-tat, and here's a couple of airplanes going around in a circle up above. Doesn't mean, I don't know, from another 2 airplanes. And they shot down one of our P-40s at that time, and we shot down one of their Zeros.
Right.
Well, that was the first I saw of the war. That was the first or second of them. And I didn't see any more of them for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, because, okay, so then they started, they found out they had Dutch Harbor, and they found out that the Japanese were in the island.
And there was an aircraft. They had a Japanese aircraft carrier, see.
Okay, and so then you,
And
so
that's
then.
what made them nervous. Because with the aircraft carrier, they were not aware of the fact it was land-based planes. Now, the aircraft carrier didn't mind taking on our aircraft carriers.
Right.
But they couldn't take on land-based planes.
Right.
Because the land-based planes would come and go, where aircraft carriers, you know...
You could have a lot more planes, probably.
So they were fearful of losing their aircraft carriers, so they hit the road.
Okay. So then, all right.
That's when they went down to Kiska and Attu and stayed down there for the rest of the war.
They were on those islands for the whole war until 44. Like you could never get them off.
Until that was the battle of the South Pacific extended beyond that.
When did okay? I should know this.
Oh,
when was V-Day?
Saipan and Attu and
was that in 45 that the Japanese surrendered, or when was?
In 1946.
46 Japanese surrendered. I should know this.
Yeah.
So they were, okay. If you were there in 41, though, that meant you would have been in the islands for 5 years.
Well, I got up there, parts of 5 years, like I said. Although, they did move me to Alaska. See, after about 3.5 years out in the Aleutians, they moved me to Anchorage. So I was up in Anchorage there for almost a year. And I got shipped home out of Anchorage, really.
And when did they manage to get the Japanese out of Alaska, out of the Atolls?
Well...
Or did they never do it?
Oh, they got them out of there. That was another unfortunate thing. Pretty miserable. And we've been up there now for 4 or 5 years, so there's no reason in the world why the Army didn't know what kind of weather we had and everything up there. But when they landed on Attu and Kiska to drive the Japanese away, they had already abandoned one of the islands. There was nobody there. And on the other island, there were still some Jap troops. But we are sending troops from the United States to remove the Jap from Kiska and Attu. Right. And in the meantime, the Japanese are all but gone.
They abandoned it.
So, in one case, they attack the Japs on this side, they attack the Japs on this side. There's no Japs in the middle. They're all gone. They're shooting at one another.
Oh,
the American troops.
They didn't know? I mean, why didn't they, fly over it? And I guess maybe you can't.
That's just it. We did, because these planes that we were shutting down from
from Kiska, not from Kiska, but from Umnak, where I had been.
Right.
These planes, and we would get a daily report, a little newspaper up in the office, and I could read the daily, what was going on. And it was saying our planes were flying down to Kiska and touched base on their airport. They had an airport down there too.
Right.
And after a while, nobody would shoot at them. They couldn't understand this. But they would report, gee, this guy would touch base, and they had to go down a valley to land on this strip that the Japs had down there.
Right.
And at first, if they tried that, they were getting shot up all over. But down towards the end, nobody would shoot at them. They couldn't understand that. But nevertheless, they proceed with this attack. And everybody who goes up there is what we call ODs. They don't have winter clothing. They have the clothing they've been training with in California, landing on Umnak and Kiska. Well, it's cold there. There's snow deep, And they go on board. They're getting trench foot. The people are just all soaking wet. And here comes some troops here comes... But they're both U.S. troops, and they're shooting at one another.
Yeah.
And then on the other island, they did have a final run. The Japanese rushed down on this group, and fortunately, they were able to wipe them out. But it was a very, very poorly organized and run war down there in Kiska, and that too, I can tell you. Mm. You ought to read that in your gadget. It'll tell you all about how terrible. And people were getting trench foot down there,
Right.
They didn't have any clothing. They couldn't change their socks, couldn't change their boots, couldn't change this. So it was pretty miserable.
That's interesting. We gotta go on the boat.
Yeah. Daddy, we're gonna have, can you pause this? We're gonna have spare ribs for dinner tonight. You wanna stay for dinner? We're gonna go on the boat.
If somebody were to